I know you're,
I'm a chunky
yeah, I know
stuff.
you're aware of it.
Oh, yeah, but they're,
Home rules are a very big issue in Florida. It's getting worse. Watch it what the legislature's doing now. You're gonna now keep. Some of these, yeah, no, it's upsetting.
Why did you do that? That's not right. That's not
It could,
right.
it could potentially. Yeah, that's frustrating, very, very frustrating. Plus you show you who's controlling money in Tallahassee. Why our lobbyists don't feel this push on it.
We'll have quorum if, no one else.
Yeah, we have four.
You'll be the voting member and then you can chair.
They don't even have, they don't even have workshop. Oh, I don't think so. Yeah, I'll do that. What else?
My name is Heather Neal. I apologize. Nice to meet you. I'm Heather for sure. Yeah.
I was in court all day. That night was when I was in charge of it. So,
This really is.
was, I learned a lot.
Are you ready?
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. We do have a quorum, so we'll start. A bit of news, Trevor did resign formally from the board, and I do have note that Butch will be out today. So I think the first course of business will be to elect an interim chair for today. So someone, it would be appropriate for someone to make a motion to appoint someone as chair.
I'll make a motion to appoint Chris Simon for chair for today.
I'd second the motion.
All in favor?
Wonderful.
Was
So I
that
think
Mr. Remicchio? I'm sorry. Is that you? Thank you.
So first, we'll just start it from the top then. You can open the meeting and then we can do the pledge of allegiance and so on.
All right, so I'd like to call the meeting in order, June 27th, planning and development meeting, call to order. And start with pledge of allegiance. Tom, leading the room with pledge of allegiance.
Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I think we're going to, see if I can start with the approval of the minutes, if I can get a motion to approve.
Today's agenda?
Oh, today's agenda, I'm skip that, there we are. Roll call, we need to get to a roll call, I was looking for the first one. If we could have a roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. McGuire,
Present.
Mr. Remicchio,
Present.
Mr. Harper,
Present.
Acting Chair Simon.
Present.
Have a quorum.
All right, if we can get a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So, second.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Who was the first?
Moved by Remicchio, second by McGuire.
Thank you.
Motion passed, the motion passes. We also need to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Can we get a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes, second.
Second. Motion carries.
Okay, so that was a motion by Mr.
McGuire.
McGuire and second by Remicchio.
Harvard.
Harper, thank you.
Yes. Next item would be communications and announcements. Any reports from staff, please?
Yes, good evening, and I'm Amanda Ragg, Planning and Zoning Director. I do have a couple of items to report on. The first, formally on the record, I'd like to let everyone know that Trevor did resign from the board after a full 10 years of service. So of course, the city thanks him for all of this time and dedication to the city. Second, I wanted to add that since we do have also Butch out today, the City Commission will be discussing the new advisory board ordinance on July 18th. So it's been recommended to me that we hold off on assigning a new chair or vice chair until the new ordinance is passed. If you're interested, again, that should be discussed at July 18th. Two other pieces of information. Next, the item that was before you on the April 25th meeting, which was the training indoor facility and car wash amendments, were heard by City Commission and they did pass. So those are now part of the land development regulations. And lastly, a piece of good news, the city did hire a new planner one. Sibel Baudet is here, if you could just wave, as the newest addition to the planning team. She comes with some planning experience and a recent graduate with a master's degree. So we're very happy to welcome her to our team. That's all I have.
Very good, very good. Do we have any old business to report? Follow up on? None. Move on to new business. Item 7A, comprehensive plan year update, 2023. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, board. My name is Andrew Meyer, senior planner, and I'm presenting text amendments to the comprehensive plan based upon the city's evaluation and appraisal review. Next slide. The evaluation and appraisal review, also known as the EAR, is required by state statutes. Every 7 years, the city must determine whether the need exists to amend the comprehensive plan to reflect changes in state requirements since the last time the comprehensive plan was updated. On July 22nd of last year, the city sent a letter to the state notifying them that the comprehensive plan would be amended in response to state requirements. The proposed amendments included the addition of a property rights element. Since the EAR process follows a state-coordinated review process, the adoption of these amendments must occur in 2 phases, a transmittal phase and an adoption phase. This hearing is the first part of the transmittal phase. Next slide. So stated earlier, the proposed amendments is the addition of a property rights element. On July 1st, 2021, Section 162.3177, subsection 6I2 of the Florida statutes was amended to require all local governments to adopt and include a property rights element in its comprehensive plan. The statute further requires it either using specific property rights statements stated in the statute or using language which does not conflict with the provided language. The proposed property rights element repeats the property rights statements included in the state statute. As such, staff recommends approval of the proposed comprehensive plan text amendments for transmittal to the State Land Planning Agency, which is the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, also known as the DEO. After tonight's hearing, the item will be brought to the City Commission, and if approved for transmittal, will be transmitted to the DEO for the state's review. Within 60 days, the DEO provides an objection, recommendation, and comments report to the city. Once the city receives the report, the city has 180 days to hold the second public hearing for adoption. The city is estimating that the second public hearing will occur sometime around November of this year. That concludes my presentation. Staff is available if you have any questions.
Are there any questions from the board?
Yeah, let's go back to it. I mean, it kind of looks like this copy was lifted and wasn't really, I'd like you to perhaps provide a little bit of layman language to this, and round this off a bit, and give us an example of where this might be enacted and used in the future.
You would like me to provide an example of that? Yeah. Basically, this language in the comprehensive plan text amendment proposed is based upon the state statute. So back in 2021, the state made those changes to state statute, and they require all municipalities to incorporate either the language spelled out in the state statute or to develop the own language regarding property rights. But the own language of property rights cannot be in conflict with the statements of property rights within the state statute. So we are going through this year process, which is every 7 years is an evaluation of the comprehensive plan in compliance with state requirements specifically. And since this is within the state statutes, that was the conflict that we identified. So we are bringing this this property rights element to you today to bring that up to speed with state statutes part of this.
And just to be clear, this doesn't afford any additional rights. This is essentially a reinstatement of constitutional rights within the state statutes already.
Does this apply to our last commissioner meeting when they were discussing leasing agreements with Airbnb, et cetera? Would that be affected by this? No.
I don't know.
Yeah, couple things. Question. Currently, there's no language in the comp plan that provides for property rights.
And not directly, that's covered within state statutes already. So it was never required to reiterate those requirements within cities' comp plans up until I believe last year's legislative session where it became required to reiterate this language within each municipality's comp plan.
It's basically clarifying.
I would say it's repetitive. If there's no additional clarification here, this is taken just about verbatim from state statutes requirements.
That's all the comments.
Just sounds like a clerical thing.
Yes, sir.
Right, so just to kind of reiterate or confirm, this is taking the state verbiage, updating ours within the city itself. This is not something that we can necessarily make a judgment, make a recommendation, modify in any way. This is just acknowledging that this is taking place and there's differences between the two, and here they are.
Yes,
So
sir,
this-
and all the cities that we have reviewed so far did exactly what we are bringing and
That's
trying
right.
to do. It's copying the state statutes and bringing it into the elements of the
So
comp.
rather than it being something, not to interrupt, but rather than it being something
Specific, yeah.
specific or to have discussion and kind of necessarily vote upon it, we still have to kind of move to approve it, but this is more of an acknowledgement that this is taking place and it's not anything that we need to be too concerned about. When I first looked at this, just to kind of touch on a correspondence that occurred during, between this meeting and the previous meeting, I initially thought maybe this is an opportunity to bring up the conversation and the point about the email Portland that you had generated to Fish about the lag or level of lag. So that I thought maybe that was a chance to kind of bring that into this, but they're two separate items. So I'm going to keep those keep them separate, and I don't know if there's not really any public present, but just going to open it up to the floor in case there.
Just one other question,
Yes.
Chair. Was there specific case law that the planning department is aware of that initiated the property rights legislation? Was there an issue that we should be aware of? I'm aware of what's going on with affordable housing and some of the things they've done there with mandating the zoning requirements and some of those changes. Did that come out of a case that I could review? Not that it's not going to affect my supporting this tonight. I just, for my own efficacy, I'd like to research it myself.
Sure, absolutely. I do not know. I will say that the requirement to include this within cities' comp plans came out of the 2021 session. So it is a couple of years old already. Live Local, as we know, just was approved recently. So I do not believe that they were related in any way, shape, or form. But I'm not aware that it came out of any type of legal
It's just a
action.
basic right. I mean, property rights are
Yes.
almost like constitutional rights and alienable rights. So it's kind of odd that we have to reiterate it in our comp plan. in the planning without specifics to what we're reiterating other than the property rights language.
Yeah, I
So
generally
it's just
agree. Yes, I generally agree. We were all kind of surprised that this would need to be included. Like I said, there's no additional rights given, and we obviously cannot take away any rights.
You know, like Burke Harris and other, previous conversations, so it's interesting. Okay, thank you.
Just one more quick question. So, and this is just strictly, as was early outlined by the chair, just to sort of clean up some verbiage, but it has nothing to do with any recent closures on property adjacent to, the two parcels that just closed right around us. This has nothing to do with giving clarity to those new owners or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Again, just, it sounds like this was at the state level, unrelated, which.
I guess they forgot about home rule,
Well, in the verbiage here, I mean, you can see from policy, 10.1.1 through 3 appears to be property, which is real estate. The last item appears to be property, material items, whether it be a vehicle or something that's physically touched, as it describes through property through sale or gift.
Probably more to come, I'm afraid.
Yeah, which that could still also be treated as real estate, but the way it's written, I interpret that to be other types of property that can be owned and possessed. So again, just if there's no more discussion with the board, questions, I don't see any public, but I'd like to open up public comment. Seeing none, see if we have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Here, motion and a second.
Sure.
Second by Mr. Rubicchio. And do we need to take a roll call on this?
I don't think that's necessary, to be honest with you.
We just,
It's controversial.
Yeas,
Just call.
yeas and nays.
Just call.
Not something to vote, right? So,
Voice vote then?
I'm
Voice
sorry?
vote, you want to do voice vote?
Sure.
that's fine.
We also, yeah.
I mean, it's controversial and you split and I would say you were voice vote, but this seems very.
Right, it doesn't seem like something that we necessarily have to, attorneys,
I would
what's the
suggest that
position?
I would suggest that there's a voice vote only because, motion second and there always has to be a vote, so.
Perfect.
Yes.
That's, we'll go with that then. Can I hear, all those in favor, aye? Aye. And nays? Ayes have it. Carries, and we're on to the next item, which I reading these as separate, so I'm gonna assume they're separate. Items, item 7B, amendment to the land development regulations. We have a presentation for that.
Okay. Good evening, planning and development board members. My name is Jane Kim with the Planning and Zoning Divisions. I'm here to present code amendments to establish landscape permit procedure and to Article 1, environmental protection standards, also known as the tree preservation code. So summary of changes under this amendment. The first thing I want to bring it to your attention to challenges and limits to the current code. First thing, absence of a procedure to remove the palms and trees, inconsistencies with the current landscape industry, and limited options to replace the removed trees. And lastly, discrepancies throughout the Article 1 environmental protection standards. So proposed amendments will be to establish procedures, submittal requirements, and review criteria pertaining to removal of trees or plants. Update Article 1 to be consistent with the current landscape industry. Cleaning up the subsections to be consistent with the other parts of the LDRs. And provide 3 replacements, also mitigation options. Next few slides will to cover the proposed amendment in detail. Next. So first thing, landscape permits. Review criteria and approve the process. Landscape permit established and emphasized the review criteria that warrants request removal of trees or palms being consistent with the tree preservation code. The landscape permit is also designed to regulate approval process and exploration as it is pertaining to a full tree or palm removal. Second, exemptions. The exemptions are currently defined to allow tree palm removal without any replacement and are regulated under Chapter 4, Article 1. Staff is proposing to relocate that exemptions from the Article 1 and then rewritten under new landscape permit procedure and then clarifies for further for user friendly. And third is a different bets. The removal of trees and palms can be necessary to preserve a healthy environment in the neighborhood and a further public safety, such as tree clearance by a utility company or removal of invasive species. Under the current regulations, replacement is not required for such a removal. The proposed amendment will require the replacement with respect to the landscape plan and considerations to the existing site conditions. So, updates and cleaning up the Chapter 4, Article 1, which is environmental protection standards. Exemptions from the mitigation protection requirements are actually removed from the Article 1 and rewritten under landscape permit, which is a new process to review removal of trees and palms. And sort of this is our consolidated locations that any procedure that is going to be pertaining to removal of trees and palms. And the redundant of bird disease. Remove the standards of the city approval procedures currently as set in Article 1. We are striking through and then referring to the specific sections to provide consistencies with the other parts of the LDRs. And then invasive species will be subject to a procedure established under a landscape permit. Currently, if you are invasive species, you are calling as invasive species removal. There's definitely it does not require any staff review. It does not require any documentations. So oftentimes we are missing out what's being technically removed based on current code. And also exotic species are currently regulated on the invasive species, and they're prohibited. But it is not consistent with the current landscape industries. So we are removing that word exotic species from these invasive species. Currently, fertilizer regulations are regulated in 2 different parts of the LDRs. We are removing the fertilizer use regulations from the Article 1 and refers to Article 12. So it is only one location to regulate the fertilizer regulations. Also, staff would like to emphasize that there's no material change to this Article 1. It is very focusing on updating the tree preservation code and being consistent with the other parts of the LDRs. So mitigation and replacement requirements. So this is one of our, along with the landscape permits, and this is one of our major amendments under this proposed Article 1. 3 types of mitigations will direct the development applications pertaining to tree or palm removals. So first one is a caliper replacement. Accumulative caliper range of the existing trees to be removed is required to be replaced on site with an equal or greater number of caliper inches of replacement canopy trees. If a tree with 24 inches is removed, the applicant shall plant 6 of 4-inch caliper trees on site. That's the requirement, caliper replacement. The second one is a canopy replacement. If a tree or palms are removed before obtaining approval of a landscape permit or obtaining city approval to remove the trees, and then the applicant remove the trees, the number of replacement trees or palms required is based on the removed canopy area in square feet Oftentimes, this canopy area can be calculated based on area map provided by Palm Beach Property Appraisals. So, for example, if a tree with 800 square foot measured on the area image by through the Palm Beach Property Appraisal is removed, and then the applicant shall replace it with 3 trees that spread at least a 20-foot diameter at maturity on site, or applicant shall replace it with 7 trees that spread less than 20-foot diameter maturity on site. 800 square foot is typically 24-inch oak trees can have 800 square foot. So when I give the examples so you can understand what could be ultimately required. The next one is a payment in lieu of a replacement. Tree with 24-inch caliber that has a good and a fair condition and rating will be determined if grid requirements will be determined based on the canopy replacement or caliber replacement. However, if it is determined that it's not feasible due to the lack of available planting space, an applicant will have an option to meet all or part of the replacement for tree or palm by paying into tree trust funds an amount of money based on the payment schedule. So for example, if the tree is a 24-inch caliber that has a good and a fair condition rating prepared by arborist or landscape architect, will have to pay $6,000 because it's $250 per caliber inches. Or applicant has option to plant 3 4-inch caliber trees on site and pay the remaining caliber, which is 12-inch multiple $250 equals $3,000. So they have options how they want to mitigate it based on their existing site conditions or based on their proposed developments. One of the last change to mitigation that I like to emphasize is current code allows if you remove the trees, you can replace it with coconut palms or royal palms. The proposed amendment, if you remove trees, it must be replaced with the trees. And that's the only options. If you remove the palm, it has to be replaced with the palm. Or if you want to remove the palms, can be replaced with the trees, but it will not allow to remove the trees to be replaced with palms anymore. Recommendation. Staff recommends approval of the subject amendments to the land development regulations to establish the procedure for landscape permit and the mitigation options to be utilized for development application pertaining to removal of the tree or palms. That concludes my presentation, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you very much. And no public, before we get to the board, do we have any public comment? Seeing none, we'll open up to the board for conversation and questions for staff.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Question, clarification on definition. I notice you are clearly separating the definition between trees and palms. Understanding palms are a monocot, grass. Is that why you're separating palms and trees and not interchanging the word palm tree with like a hardwood tree? Is that the explanation of that?
Yes, you're absolutely correct, because they have very different values, they have different functions, and so the current code was amended back in 2012, so literally 11 years ago. That time the trend was considered palm tree, people call it palm as a palm tree, but today's industries, so there is very different values to it between palm and the trees. So we like to establish the differences and their functions difference throughout and that's one of the amendments is to be consistent with today's landscape industry.
Quick clarification on your response. Is the clarification environmental based on the capture of carbon gases? And
Yes.
is that the only
No,
determination?
urban heat is one of the concerns, of course, the stormwater issues as well. So those are fact, and the tree is much more valuable. I'm not disregarding the palms. The palm is absolutely beautifies the urban, and it's necessary for the urban settings, but it definitely has different values, so that's why we want to separate it.
I just, and I respect that, I just don't want to see it devalued being a palm biologist and being someone who's the past longtime president of the Palm Beach Palm and Cycad Society. So it's, and being on the international board of the Palm Society, I just want to make sure that we don't devalue palms that much. I do understand the separation of the two, but there is a lot of aesthetic value and a lot of value in different types of value that need to be equated. So point well taken, and I appreciate the separation. When we talk about invasive species in your presentation, so we have a lot of, help me understand the replacement of, say, a Ficus altissima or a banyan tree. So if you have, a piece of property and you remove a tree without a permit, I understand that it's a caliper equation to replace that tree. I have a direct experience with that with Knollwood. Many of you know that's been on staff here, Amanda specifically. Many years ago when Joe Casella was on the city commission, I had just moved into Knollwood, and I promised my wife I would stay away from getting involved in city government. And within a couple of weeks, the board, because the city had cited Knollwood for not maintaining their vacant 5-foot preserve, their 5-acre preserve space that they had, the board went and hired a land clearing company, and they came out and grubbed and scrubbed land, but my home was right behind them. So I was very agitated to see very large caliper banyan trees, ficus trees. Remember, we're talking about the old Knollwood Roads, an old historic site that housed acres and acres of citrus farms that I remember as a young boy riding through with my family. So I had a lot of affection for that property and was very disturbed to see the land completely grubbed and cleaned like it was. In fact, many neighbors started calling the city saying, hey, is Minor Road going to be extended to Military Trail? All that conversation took place. So the city was fining Knollwood Homeowners Association, I'm currently the president, for removing all those trees. And it was a $25,000 fee that we were going to have to pay. So having worked with Ed Brees, as you know, I'm the former mayor of the city of Lake Worth. Ed Brees was my planning and zoning director. So I saw that he was on staff here, so I contacted him. And I met with him along with my neighbor, who was State Representative Joe Casella, now, but was currently a city commissioner. And I said, let's see if we could resolve this issue in a meaningful way. And so I was offering exactly, and I think, Amanda, you were involved in some way, I believe, with approving the ultimate recommendation, but we did that exact thing. They took a survey, a Google map, and they identified the number of trees, and we worked out a 3-for-1, 2-for-1 based on the types of trees and palms. And the only thing I wanted was to front load it. I don't want to bore you with the details, but my point is, so if somebody removes an invasive species like an altissima or a ficus, that the county requires, if you have an invasive species on your city property, the county requires you to remove it. At least they used to have a specific date and time that you had to remove it. And it kind of faded away, but there still is in the county code the removal on public property for invasive species. So if you remove, like, take my case and set it aside, but it's there, if somebody removes an invasive species, a Brazilian pepper, and it's 2 foot around, and 24-inch caliper, would they be required? And believe me, I'm a plant person. I have a nursery in Lantana, Vermelia Nursery, so I respect and would want to see the replacement, but of something. But I want to have some common sense applied as well. we really need to, some of these plants really suck up so much water and are really so bad that,
Absolutely, and I do remember that,
can
and
they
I
help
think
with that?
yeah, and absolutely, some of the things that we did in those cases, in several code cases specific to HOAs, were done out of common sense and not out of what the code said, because the code was silent to a lot of this. Currently, if you do remove an invasive species, you are not required to replace it. However, if that invasive species was required as part of an approved plan, you would have to replace it on a one-for-one basis with an approved species.
Thank you.
Yes, she's, yes, it's correct. So to add to that, one of the change that we made it is that we emphasize on the category 1. So some of them believe the biogases are classified as a probably category 2, and some of them are, they're not subject to this. So, yes, so the code, the draft is only category 1 that is applicable to, like the cattle. Those are used to be part of and approve the landscape plans. So if you remove that, absolutely, but it has to be required to replace with a one-for-one, so.
Okay. So my final is the payment in lieu of, it leads right into this. So if you remove a Brazilian pepper, the 24-inch example I just mentioned, I would understand, then you wouldn't require them to replace that tree, you would have them replace
So let me,
I just don't want them to have to do the
Absolutely.
payment in lieu of, but rather than
Right.
plant the material, I'm not in favor.
so if the plants are removed, the trees are removed, and it was a category 1 invasive species, they are not subject to payment in lieu, because they will be
Thank you.
1-for-1.
Thank you.
So all they have to do is, doesn't matter what the caliper size is, if the category 1 is removed, they need to replace it with 1 trees.
So here's my concern with the payment in lieu of it, as you start adding the payment in lieu of in so many different elements of our code, including housing, et cetera. It really sets a bad precedent. It's gonna come back eventually and bite us. I'll give you a couple of
If I
examples.
could,
Yeah.
just clarify,
Mhm.
the payment in lieu can only be used with the, planning and zoning director's approval. So it is not meant to not provide mitigation of trees.
Okay,
It is literally a tool if it
Okay.
cannot physically be put.
can we strengthen the language, whether it's with
Yes.
Sure.
It has a language that very
Point that
specific,
to me, please.
sure,
That's the most important part, because I will give you an example. Say, just take a new project, they come to the city and they're required to put the minimum which, I'd like to see us move from minimum landscape requirements, every project is the minimum landscape requirements. I'd like to see us move to a different direction, but I'm afraid you're gonna start paying in lieu of, and the money will go into a fund that doesn't really help. what
No, and
we're trying
that
to do.
fund, will be used to plant right away. So that fund will only be able to be used to green the city. So any dollars that go into that will be towards greening, either right of ways or parks.
Wait, but what about the specific site? Here
So let me-
we're shifting the landscape
Right.
from what's
let
required
me
there
explain.
to a different place.
So the purpose of this is, like Amanda explained, is when there's absolutely no space to mitigate all the trees. One of the property that came up was, it was off the Boynton Beach Boulevard, and with the corner with Old Boynton Beach Boulevard, there's a lot of beautiful oak trees with literally 20-40 calipers. If that property gets redeveloped, they think about the number of calipers they have to mitigate it. Oftentimes, when the application coming for the development, they provide plenty of trees to comply with the mitigation requirements to replace the calipers. Oftentimes, it works. Occasionally, there's a property with existing trees that is that big, having a hard time to comply. And that's the staff will work with applicants. So it's not something they can, I just wanna pay the fee and then I don't have to provide.
So,
Absolutely not,
Okay.
because there is a landscape code, they still have to apply. They still have to apply to meet the buffer requirements, they still have to comply with street tree requirements. So it's not only
So,
to be.
so it's a staff review, so right now we have the best staff you could possibly get in the state of Florida, and we're really proud of that. But you have to think about putting things in place in your code that protects the city. If, say, you're not here and you get really bad planners that just are developer, and it's not fair to say developer friendly, but they're not really thinking
Yes.
about the planning of the city.
One more point that I could add, to hopefully make you a little bit more comfortable, is this payment in lieu of is purely for mitigation. It is not for landscape requirements.
They would always have to meet the.
Exactly, they always have to meet landscape requirements. This is only to be used if you are clearing the site for development and cannot meet both mitigation and the minimum landscape code.
Fair enough.
So, just
Thank
for a little bit more, we try to make it a little bit more focused, because we have had similar situations in specifically HOAs, where they do take down one large tree for, let's say, a safety and access, a driveway. We had an example for a driveway. It was nearly impossible to replant that. That HOA had to do like a 3-year phased approach to meet the mitigation requirement, because we didn't have any options except for caliper by caliper. So we don't want to punish HOAs that are doing the right thing coming to us first, because the way the code was set up, they could have pulled out that tree and we don't know any better. So this is trying to give options to still get the greening whenever we can, and if it is infeasible, to mitigate, not to plant what's required. This just gives us another way to use that requirement to green other areas.
Fair enough. And we, in Norwood, for example, if a tree dies, I require as the president, by the way, the only way I became the president of the HOA is I recalled the board, and then after mediation, going before the judge, in the end, the judge said, congratulations, Mr. Rucci, you're now, oh, great. My wife said, so maybe divorce. Thank you, you guys are the best.
Thank you very much. Member Riccio, other members, Dwyer, Harper, do we have any questions?
Tom pretty much answered. I had the question regarding the payment, and Lily kind of brought everything up, so.
All right, I do have just a few questions, as this is something I deal with on a daily basis, and I have a lot of history of. And I do, like, just to stay on the payment in lieu of, and I understand your positions and your questions and concerns. I understand the position of the city, and this is, they're trying to apply safeguards in there to not just allow it to occur, right? When you first read it, you don't want to just offer somebody a way out, right? And I totally agree with that. But what I would say, just in dealing with this in the past, my time when I was involved with dune restorations, instead of the mitigation going into a fund, developers were, before they could get their CO on projects or approvals for, let's say they did some demo and before they go in for their site plan, or they have done demo, they've done site plan before they get their CO. It was required that they install the material on another site. So for example, there was a project that was in Highland Beach. I was on the contractor side at that point. We were working on the dune in Highland Beach. We, as part of that contract, had to plant at the Atlantic Dunes Park. X amount of dollars, they provided, here's your mitigation dollar amount. We had to install material that equaled on behalf of the client, right? So I would advise to, instead of it just being set up as a tree canopy fund that may sit for a number of years, certainly you can earn extra dollars by investing in that, right, or sitting on that for longer. You can earn interest off that money over time, but who's to say when that ever gets used? Let's say you all go out and then something, all of a sudden you know, something, the town vision changes and the setbacks and the requirements change, and then now the money is sitting there and the tree never got planted. So I would suggest that the tree canopy trust fund be a, condition for, that has to be installed before the project is final,
So,
prior to final inspections. So that's where the city would say, okay, here's the list of parks, green spaces that can be planted. They have to plant 12 trees. You decide which park you want to put it in, and then they offer you, here's the list of trees they can pick from, and they say, okay, we're gonna put 3 Gumbo Limbo at wherever, pick a park. And that gets done before the project is final.
Can you tell me what city had those regulations? That's really interesting. The one thing I do like.
This was in Highland Beach.
This was Highland
Yeah.
Beach, okay.
And then there are a lot of other municipalities that I've come across we can correspond as well, potentially. Not a lot, but there are other municipalities.
The one thing I like about that is that it takes the work off city staff too, because spending
Absolutely.
dollars for the city does take resources. We do already have a tree trust fund, and there are dollars in it that the sustainable coordinator was using for community greening programs.
Yep.
But this would be the first time I think significant dollars could be in that, and we don't really have a way to spend those dollars efficiently yet. So I'm interested and I'm happy to look over other options for that too. Jay, do you have any kind of immediate reactions to that?
it's again, like she explained, we don't really have that idea of how it's going to be utilized. It's just based on my experience with the two different cities. It's tree trust funds are used for city projects. It's oftentimes managed by the city staff. So your case, it's called Highlands case, was the tree trust funds will be utilized by the developer to plant that money, use that money to plant the different locations. But in the cities that I come along, the experience, they have their own teams that can do the same job. It's very possible Highlands has a very small town, they might not have staff or resource to do it, so they had outsourcing use that fund versus our city may have resource to establish that using their money. Again, we will have more further discussions once these will be implemented.
Right.
And I will add, just being the planning and zoning director and someone who's involved in a lot of city projects, a point of struggle when the city are financing and paying for projects, we hear a lot that there's no dollars for landscaping. So it would be nice to have in my arsenal of dollars that we can contribute that are specific to that on city projects. So I see value in both. It'll just take more research. And I will say this is our first, like Jay said, this hasn't been updated in over 10 years. There's definitely room to add to this as we start, but I will definitely look into.
Well, and maybe it's something like a dollar amount that you just pay into the fund that gets used later, like on the other projects, or it's, and which maybe that's a cheaper or higher dollar amount, or this other dollar amount that is your equation that you need to plan. And maybe there, instead of it being, at the plan reviewer's discretion, based on case by case situation. Maybe say, okay, then you need 20 trees. Well, we don't need 20 trees in this area, so why don't you do 10 in this and 10 goes into the fund. So, I'm sure there's language that can be developed that might be able to kind of accomplish both goals.
Sure, yes, thank you for those comments. We will definitely keep reviewing other options.
Sure. And I just do have just a couple of other points, because I deal with this often with different cities, and typically we would come across situations where it's usually one or the other, caliper versus canopy. They don't go either. I understand that there's situations where you might have something like a large banyan tree or large ficus trees that just get cut back year after year after year, and you might have a 20-foot canopy and a 40, like an 8-foot wide diameter trunk, right? So in those situations, maybe that's a case by case or type of tree that you may want to consider. But it's typically one or the other. In John's Island right now, just filing for permit on projects that they're using canopy specifically. Existing, what was removed, what's proposed, you receive any tree you're putting in is a canopy credit. So you have a flat rate, no matter if you put a 60-foot diameter tree in, you're only going to get. I'm sorry. At a certain point, they changed the specimen, but you could put a 10-foot tall tree in or a 18-foot by 12-foot wide, and you still get 900 canopy credits for a particular tree.
So the way it is written right now is the first option is to replace the caliper. If there is no remaining left, which is like tree trimmer comes and cut off the whole top, and then there's still a tree trunk left, we use to mitigate it, so based on the caliper.
Okay.
If they completely remove the trunk, there's nothing left, then we use that canopy, but it has to be reasonable. It won't be used after head rack.
And I
That's
think
what
Jim
you're
is a really good example of an issue that we see constantly. People remove trees without approvals.
Yep.
And we have no record of what was removed, because our minimum standards is a 4-inch caliper tree, so we see people who are removing 20-inch mature caliper trees, and the code only asks for 1 4-inch caliper tree. So this is meant as a tool to correct mistakes that were done without city approval.
That's right.
So the way that we are doing it is caliper. If they do it without approval, then we will refer to canopy to get mitigation for what was removed.
Is there a means to be able to require tree surveys from, let's say, 2 years prior, 1 year prior, 3
We
years
ask for
prior?
them, so we do, and if we can get those, we will use caliper. So canopy is really only for the instances where we do not have information to rely on.
Right, so if you get, because I'm familiar with projects that they may go in and do a bit of clearing, and then get your current survey, and then here's what's here, here's what we have to mitigate. So it alleviates sometimes grading issues, sometimes tree issues, things like that. So and then there's a lot of different kind of conflicts, I guess you could say too. Like back to John's Island, their tree requirements, I think, is back from the 80s, so they still have carrotwoods as a tree that's protected. John's Island, not John's Island, the Indian Creek in Miami, the historic village island down there, just had a large banyan tree that was $250,000 to relocate it on site. It was on site, they moved it, it was $250,000 to move this tree, and the county came back and said that, this is an invasive tree, this must be removed after they've already spent that money. The city says, no, this is something that we want to keep because it's part of the history of the island, the village, I guess you could say. So their local requirement stood, and they were able to kind of keep that. So their local authority overrode the county at that point. So they were able to kind of work that out. So I think there's, like you said, there's different categories. There's different situations, there's different means. So I think that the town, the city of Boynton Beach has an opportunity to kind of, these things that we've talked about, and a lot of different meetings and projects that we need to add some more trees and vegetation to these projects. I noticed that this only has to do with your tree removals at this time. And I don't see any verbiage in here or extra credits or otherwise addressing native versus non-native species.
So that's a native and non-native, so are not under this Article 1, they will go into Article 2, landscape standards. And those will be, this is actually phase 1. phase 2 is actually bringing to you the amendment to the current landscape code to be more aligning with the current industries, and then that will be discussed.
But that would be unproposed.
Yes.
Okay, but on your removals as well, I think you should also address that. If a native oak tree, limbo, whatever, that may be a little bit extra, let's say it's 24-inch native tree, well, now you gotta go in with a 32-inch credit, right? Or if you remove a non-native, right, if it's a, whatever, crepe myrtle, and, well, now you gotta go in with, it's 1-for-1, whereas native might be, 1.5. So, something like that, I think that might also, help as well. So some of the other comments that I did have really, I guess, have to do with when we come back to the proposed, because I didn't see any information in here. This is because it's removals, and it's probably not the appropriate time to discuss those items, other than the sod, where you're mentioning about the sod that is required for the low water requirement to be installed. Low water requiring sod species to be installed, is that for like when they're land clearing prior to a demo or
Yeah, the current code allows it, if you do clearing cropping, you can do the mulch or you can seeding, and that's 2 options. We are removing that from this article, and it requires a sod. It has to be sodded, or you need obtained and do the groundbreaking to continue your project. Or if you just doing the clearing cropping for future developments that have to comply with the mitigation requirements or the removing of vegetations, as well as they have to sod.
Okay, good on you for that, because I think the seeding and mulching are kind of bad ideas. The mulching, especially because it's going to end up down the street, right?
It's a major pain.
Yeah, I'm sure.
To deal with.
I'm
Very,
sure.
very
Unless you have
sides.
silt fence or something to retain it, right? And that sometimes that doesn't even work. And I agree with the sodding. It's a good thing. Sometimes people are going to complain and say, well, now what do I have to do? I have to irrigate that? Yes, you have to temporarily irrigate that above ground systems for a period of time. So that's established. It can be removed, it can be shut off, it can be kept in place, however they want to deal with it. So I don't see any issue with that. And then just the last piece was the fertilization. What is it that we're just eliminating it from showing up in multiple areas, is what it sounds like?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
2019, when the code was adopted, I think it was an accident that 2 parts, the same code was codified in 2 different sections. And so we are removing this one from the landscape tree preservation code. It's because it is actually under Article 12 currently. So we'll be eliminating and referring to the Article 12. So it's providing consolidated locations.
Okay, so it wasn't like something like type, so it's like, high phosphorus or anything. Okay, that answers all the questions. Anyone else? Nothing from the public. Everyone's good on the board. So we're gonna move into, see if we can get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All right, here a second. Again, we'll do a roll call, or just do a yea or nay, just
Just 1 second, that was a first by Mr. Harper and a second by,
was that John? Yep.
thank you.
For this one, I recommend a roll call.
All right, so if we can have a roll call. Vote please.
Mr. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Remicchio,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
acting chair Simon,
Yes.
4-0.
Very good. All right, so next item would be, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And your feedback. Next item, any other business? Would this be a time that, would you want to mention anything about the Live Local Act, or any, is that something you want to?
Well, I mean, it was presented, I think it should be on the agenda for discussion. There's some, future items, just so we're all apprised of all the details of it, because it's pretty wordy. And there's differences between different types of projects and different requirements. Interesting though, none of it needs to come before us or the commission.
Right.
So, yeah, I think we should put it on the agenda. I think, also possibly an update on projects and progress, progress report on what some of these parcels and when they're coming out of the ground and what are the projected dates.
Two separate things.
Yeah.
The last one being the previously approved projects within the
Yeah.
city of Boynton, that just getting a status update on those.
If I may, so I did give a presentation to the city commission on Live Local and its impacts on Boynton Beach at the last city commission meeting. So what I could do is send you a link, the video to that presentation and the PowerPoint also. I'm happy to redo the presentation for you if you would like it, but it has been done. And Mr. McGuire is right. We have several preemptions within that bill. Most notably, there are three. We are preempted from regulating use, density, and height. If it is specific to affordable housing as defined in state statute, and there are requirements, so it would have to be an eligible site, meaning commercial zoning or industrial zoning or mixed-use zoning. So it doesn't affect single-family homes or any of our residential zoning districts. And it would have to have at least 40% of those units be affordable housing for 30 years, maximum AMI of 120. So I can provide more information, the presentation, and the video to the presentation as well.
Well, why don't we suggest that be emailed to the board, and if anyone responds with a request for more clarification, further information, then we can potentially add it to the agenda for review. And then just to reiterate, being preempted, we're saying that the height restrictions that we currently have within the downtown area, someone could come in and say, you know what, we want to build something that is 200 feet tall, and we
So there is a maximum,
Right.
And in the presentation, we did show maps of what the new heights would be. Essentially, we have to allow the highest height permissible within 1 mile of the proposed site, which means 150 feet was designed to be only on a small area is now permissible within a 1 mile radius of where 150 feet is allowed. And the same is true for 100 feet, where I'll use Riverwalk as an example is, and then 75 feet where, let's say, the Mall in Congress is. So essentially, all of our commercial property has been effectively upzoned to the highest density allowed in the city, which is 100 units per acre, and between 75 and 150 feet.
The fact that we lowered the HU core height from 150 to 80 doesn't have any implications on that?
It does not, because the way the statute is written, it refers to permissible. And although we retired those districts are still permitted to go up to 150 feet. So that is still technically the highest height permissible in the city.
If there's a caveat there to that, no, that it has to be within a certain distance of regional transportation?
No.
Is that something else I'm
That is
confusing?
not, yeah, so the within a regional transportation center is specific to parking. So there's language in there that says we need to review parking and reduce parking if we are within, I think it's a half mile of a transit station.
Also
It says
density though,
major
too.
transit station.
Not density? Well, when we approved the Knuth Road project, I brought up the point that you had mentioned to us that it was, I asked where the regional transportation, because of the density, and you mentioned there was a bus stop. And my argument was, that's not a regional transportation hub, it's
So
a
the word
bus stop.
regional doesn't say, it says major transportation stop in the state statute now, and that is not defined.
Okay. Fair enough.
So, and again, that is only tied to parking, it is not tied to either density or height or use preemptions, only parking.
Either way, they really are stepping on our home rule to allow us to develop our community the way we would like to see it. And it's really troubling when this is a very slippery road. And once we go down this road, it's gonna be hard for us. State law may supersede almost all development in this city based on affordability and many other factors that are very not plan-centric. They're based on emotions and hypotheses that are failed theories that are not thought through. So it's just very upsetting. Nothing we can do about it tonight, but
Well, and
thank you for the input.
And this is a great opportunity to kind of segue into the, although I don't want to professional, segue into the annual report, which is that we can address the commission and request that they, go knock on the door of the state and acknowledge that this is a detriment to our city and to all the neighboring cities and everyone within the state.
Your best lobbyists are your elected officials in Tallahassee, but we also have a firm, Brian Ballard and that group.
Oh, great.
And we should really, but it's gonna take a leader on the commission or one of the staff to direct them to ask the consultants and the lobbyists when they go up there, this is a major priority. But there's not enough pressure put on because the money comes from the lobbyists to the elected officials, and we're paying the lobbyists to move that money in Tallahassee to make sure that they do what's right for us.
That's
And unfortunately, I think we're getting shafted.
Right, no, and just to further address the point is that if we can acknowledge that the commission needs to get together with other commissions to approach the state level and say, okay, here comes, instead of it just being City of Boynton Beach, one representative from the city commission, well, here comes 12 boards from 12 different cities or 30 or 20, you know what I mean? Who knows?
That's not what happened. This commission's not interested in that.
But if it's something that we could at least put on record, at the minimum, we would suggest that. I just do want to go back to the one point that you did say, is it because we, with the 80-foot, where we lowered to 80 feet, but there's still a few projects that have been approved at 150 feet because we allow those to keep their maximum building requirements, because we allow them to keep them, that's why this district is now.
Because those districts still exist, we couldn't take away property rights that were already on the ground. What we did is retire them, meaning they won't grow, they won't expand. And we created a new zoning district called mixed use downtown. So that doesn't negate their existence at 150 feet, and if something happens to them, they still have the right to do 150 feet. If Casa Costa blew away, Casa Costa can exist today, still under the current code.
That's really good point. That was the spirit of it.
Exactly.
I hope they stick to that, because that makes a lot of sense, and I'm okay with that they don't have to conform to the new code.
Exactly.
That they would be able to build back to the 150 feet. What I'm concerned about is the other slippery
Right,
side.
translating that to live local, however, means since it is permissible to go up to 150
Right.
feet,
And
that
that's,
is the maximum.
that's where I'm thinking, boy, I really wish we would have rethought that verbiage and which one of the three options we could have.
But we didn't, it wasn't
In hindsight.
eliminated, it wasn't eliminated citywide anyway. It was only eliminated in the specific downtown core,
Right.
because some of us wanted to see a destination district created.
Well, it was also the town's position that they didn't want to be held liable.
And it was not-
Well, no, we put
Previously.
the safeguards were there already to protect those that were already in progress. I recommended a zoning in progress, which would have then caused some litigation probably with some of those projects that were in the pipeline. There was no political support on this board or the commission to do that. So therefore, we went with the way we went with it. And
Right. And just kind of looking back, I'm curious, because I know that there's a lot of municipalities that are not able to move forward with zoning in progress just because of the declaration of emergency from the hurricanes. So depending on when that occurred and when that would have gone into effect, it may not have even been an option. The zoning in progress route. So, okay, so I think that's live local, that's kind of put to rest.
Sorry,
Yes.
may I just ask, the comments by the members, that was basically a request by the board for Amanda to send a link to the
The presentation, right.
Live
I will be
local,
emailing the Live Local presentation, and slides to the board.
Thank you.
And upon response, if there's a request to add it to the agenda, it will be dealt with at that point, but at the current time, it's not to be an agenda item.
Thank you.
Would it be okay, man, if we had on our next agenda item, just like what you can apprise us on projects that are in progress?
Yeah, we can bring something like that. I think, listening to the conversation, what I can do on a more regular basis is we do create economic development reports quarterly that does have some of that information in it. We try and see the status of some of the big projects, so what I can also do is start, CCing that to the board on a regular basis.
I'm sure we'll see a lot of affordable housing projects.
Yes, and you know, one comment that Mr. McGuire did say that I didn't touch on with Live Local is that he is correct. The other thing that Live Local does that is pretty drastic and new to the city and to Florida in general is it changes the process in which we approve projects. So we are no longer required to do land use amendments or rezonings or follow our typical due process of coming to the board and going to city commission. So any project that is eligible under Live Local is approved administratively, as long as it meets the land development regulations. So the only way that a project would be coming before the board or commission is if they are asking for some sort of relief from the code.
So including site plan and
All of it.
every aspect.
So they would still have to do the site plan, but it would be, I would think of it as they are going through the minor process instead of the major process.
So does that completely negate this board?
Yes, for Live Local projects specifically, it doesn't completely negate the board, it's just anything that is coming under Live Local would no longer have to go to this board or the city commission.
Would they go to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals versus us then?
They wouldn't go to anyone, they are administratively approved.
So the ones, the appeals, that you said we would hear
Oh,
those,
relief.
wouldn't they go to the Board of Adjustments and
No,
Appeals?
so relief is something that you guys see regularly, so relief would be something like a community design appeal, a height exception, a variance. Those types of applications are still valid and can still be brought to this board.
Thank you.
So the only way we have interpreted to remain as an administrative process is if they are meeting all the land development regulations. If they are not, then we believe right now, according to our interpretation, that we can move the project back into its federal route.
So just out of curiosity, if a project is along the lines of like 500 Ocean or something, any of these projects that are recently approved, are those automatically qualified for Live Local, or are they seeking, are they following a certain path that separates the two? I don't know if I'm asking the question, but what I'm trying to figure out is.
Nothing is automatically approved, right? So it does have to go through staff.
No, I understand that, so what says that, like just 500 Ocean, what makes 500 Ocean, or a project identical to 500 Ocean that comes in August, September, once it's goes into effect? What makes that
What makes it an eligible project for the local?
eligible, are they following a certain path?
So eligible
Application.
projects, this isn't any project. Only certain types of projects are eligible through the local. First, it has to be on commercial, industrial, or mixed-use property. That's the first eligibility requirement. The second eligibility requirement is they have to be providing 40% of their units as affordable housing for 30 years and meeting the income requirements. If they can do both of those things, then they would be eligible for Live Local. They wouldn't need to rezone. So we can see a 500 Ocean go on C3 property if they are meeting the affordable housing requirements stated in the section.
As well as within a mile of that location, with our district.
Yes. And my presentation has maps, so you'll be able to see exactly where those areas are.
So
I think the purpose is to encourage development in commercial, especially distressed commercial areas like your Dixie Highway corridor that doesn't really have the zoning to encourage redevelopment, because it has that commercial designation and industrial. This will allow some of that, but I think there's more to it, but I think it will allow for some of
It
those sites.
means that basically a lot of the recent projects that just came before the board and were approved by commission, I would say probably all three of them, Los Angeles would probably resubmit for 150 to that 85. Well, I think yours had less. I think they both, and of course, there's a difference between workforce and affordable housing.
Right.
And, I mean, maybe they won't, but, because they're so far along down the road, but they can add in 5 more floors.
Well, I disagree, because most of those projects, although they are not meeting maximum heights, they are meeting maximum density. So there's no real incentive for them to come back. They fit the maximum density within the height that they were approved under. So in theory, could they come back for a higher building? Yes, but all that does is drive the cost of construction up, because they aren't getting anything more of value out of it.
Well, unless they decide, okay, we're gonna take a 1,200 square foot unit and make a 2,500 square foot
Which is
unit.
more expensive, but they have to provide
More
affordable
expensive.
housing.
More expensive, right, more expensive, but they can also change those to, for sale. Sell them at a higher dollar amount. And
Or
sell
they
them
can-
at- has to be rental or no, has to be rental.
Has to be-
All of those projects in Livermore have to be rental, all units.
For alternatives?
Okay. So potentially, I mean, potentially there's possibility that may not get a lot of takers on that. On development.
I don't think that we'll see a major impact within our downtown. I will look at I would say that what I believe will be targeted is some of the distressed commercial areas that are targeted for redevelopment already. The only difference will be that these will be much more intense developments that the city has previously planned for. So if you think of the commercial corridor of the federal highway, those are zoned or intended to be mixed use 1, which has a maximum density of 20 units an acre, 25 units if you're doing affordable housing. So we would recommend those changes to zoning through the normal process. With the local now, they could do that without going through the process, and they can get 100 units per acre and up to 100 or 150 feet depending on where they are. So I still think it's the same targeted areas, it's just the intensity of the projects are changing. I will say that generally our ownership patterns, most of our parcels are pretty small. I could think, a handful of projects that I do think will come under the local just based on their land assembly already. So I don't think this is going to be widespread, but I do think we have some targeted areas that are right for local.
Right, and that's the potential is the land assembly to be able to.
The other
We only have a
one-
block, well, we just purchased 3 other blocks.
And the other point I'll mention is these preemptions are in effect for 10 years. The intent right now is that they will go away after 10 years, but they are right now written to be 10 years.
It's
all it takes to.
Lots can change in 10 years.
And I apologize, Amanda, for not reading that part of the statute. It has a sunset clause.
It does.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think we've kind of hashed that out pretty good. And we'll look forward to the email presentation for further information. Do we want to touch on the annual report at this time?
I think we should wait till we get the rest of the board.
And what I
Yes,
would
that's fine.
suggest also is I did get a handful of members' comments. We didn't get everyone, so what we are planning to do is reach out to the members that we didn't get comments from and bring back all of the consolidated comments at the next meeting.
All right, if there's any other,
Should we go to comments by members?
yep, I was gonna move on to that next.
I'll just quickly go. I went to the grand opening of the apartment building on Riverwalk called, I think it's called Avalon? I forget, but anyway, it's the new project right next to Josie's Restaurant, Prime Catch, very big, high density. I have to tell you, I've never seen an apartment building. I actually do marketing and advertising, probably a dozen of them. From new to old, it is the nicest apartment building I've ever been in. It is shockingly nice. I think, I've heard they're trying to achieve, $4 a foot there. The typical rental market is
What's the?
$4, I think close to $4 a foot. Well, $4 a foot is what I heard. If you see, they have wine coolers, they have separate water closets. The views are outstanding. It was really a beautiful project. I mean, they did build a first-class beautiful building. I don't know how they're gonna rent them at that price, I really don't, but it's a beautiful project. It was a big turnout, the city was there, and, I don't know, it was just interesting to see what a nice, really did come out nice, and, I encourage you to check it out, because I've been in a lot of projects with, from inception to completion, and that one really kind of shocked me. Their selling point is that view too. You see the intercoastal and you see the ocean, and the brochure doesn't have any of those pictures in it. Anyway, it was interesting. It was a beautiful building.
Very good. Good to hear. Any other comments by members? All right, seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
A second from member Remigio. Thank you
Who was
very
the
much.
first, McGuire?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, staff. Thank you.
Good job, guys.